Well, we're back again here with the Unlearning Curve. I'm Stuart Deloney, and with me is JD Forehand and Carl Forehand. This is a space where we talk about anything from mental health to spiritual grifters to kind of whatever's pissing us off generally in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And for our next segments, from our last session, JD had teased that we're going to be talking about another famous JD, one that's very close to his heart. And yeah, we're talking about grifters and folks
And
of
his
this nature. So
dysfunction.
Yeah, it's a personal fave of mine. A friend of the podcast, James Clayton Dobson Jr.
Mm-hmm.
He's a real interesting guy, let's say. And a lot of the problems that we talked about in the last podcast are directly related from him. It's not only him, obviously. You have Billy Graham as well that led to a lot of this stuff. But a lot of it coalesces in 60s, 70s politics when these guys kind of got really locked into politics. And then obviously that was super exasperating when it came to Reagan. But old James Dobson, it's crazy. He's very old. He's literally older than a boomer. He's not even a boomer.
Is he still alive?
He's still alive. He's 89 right now, I think.
Yeah.
He was born April 1st, 1936. Which is technically silent generation, not boomer. So that's crazy. He was also born in Shreveport, Louisiana, which I think he's the worst person to come out of Shreveport, which is saying something because there's a lot of trash coming out of there.
Yeah, because my dad's from Shreveport too, so that checks. Keep going.
An unfortunate coincidence.
So anyway, what do you know him from? What do you know about James Dobson? We'll see what we can clear up first, and then I'll go through everything.
I remember Focus on the Family, Adventures in Odyssey. So Focus on the Family was a radio broadcast, I believe, right? And then there were books that he produced, and he gave his sort of gave himself stuff away for a donation, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm sure it equaled out for him pretty well.
Yeah.
But he was kind of committed to being the publishing arm, the kind of the spokesman for this new movement, anti-abortion, Evangelical Christianity, and so on. And then this Adventures in Odyssey was for kids. I remember the main guy being called Wit, and we probably shared that with our children. JD.
Oh, I listened to an excessive amount of that. Even when you guys weren't with me. Even when I was like a teenager and still listening to that. I don't know why I would still listen to it, but
yeah.
Comforting or something, but I listened to it for a long time.
Then there was a pastor to pastor thing where you get those cassettes. I got 2 cassettes or something like that, and I got every one of those that I could, because you could say I can't afford it and don't send them very much money, but I think I got on a subscription to it was probably prescribed by somebody, but he was just the main, focus. Colorado City, I think,
Colorado Springs.
Colorado Springs, the hell, literal hell on earth. Yes.
Yeah, it's the center of all of that regaining power place. He was a key part of it. A lot of detrimental things that he taught.
Yeah,
I remember from him. I remember having this. Someone gave us a book. When our first when our first child was born, and it was all about how to somehow raise your kids and make sure they're not gay. Mm-hmm. I just remember this back at the time, and it was just but they got weirdly intricate into it. You had to be very careful on how you're wiping them, and diapers and stuff like that too. And I remember just being totally terrified back in my own this is back when I was working for a Southern Baptist church, of being oh no, if I wipe them wrong, I'm gonna make the gay come out. What's gonna happen? And a lot of it was just this superstitious nonsense. Yeah. It was a lot of that he pushed, but also eugenics is fun, which I know we'll get into as well.
Yep.
Which he was a big proponent of that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that is related to the fact that he basically studied to become a psychologist, and he's very much of the old school aka bullshit, like schools of psychology, which a lot of it is related to behaviorism and basically treating your children like they're animals, like they're Pavlov's dog or something. And so he gets into a lot of that. There's a lot of abusive stuff that he used to teach. So, I mean, his bibliography, right? Dare to Discipline, can, like, all these kinds of things, whatever. He's got a ton of different books, but they're basically all about like how to beat the fuck out of your kids and then like emotionally bomb them into like loving you and just like doing what you say without ever stepping out of line. So yeah, I wrote some of them down. He's got like 50 books or something though, so I'm not going to list all of them, but Dare to Discipline, What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women, Emotions, Can You Trust Them? Temper Your Child's Tantrums, Parenting Isn't for Cowards, and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, like you can go look at his Wikipedia page if you want to look at all his books. He's also, I'm sure people, whatever, if you're like into religion or if you're into politics or whatever you're into, you've heard of some of his groups, because like we talk about Focus on the Family, right? He's got the Family Research Council, which is massive, and then he's also got the Family Policy Alliance, which is another massive like lobbying organizations, and we can talk about all these to whatever degree that we want to. One interesting thing when I was researching a little bit about him was that he studied under a guy named Paul Popenoe, I believe is how you pronounce that, and he's like was legitimately just a eugenicist. So the quote from the Wikipedia page when I first was looking up who he was, when I heard his name mentioned, it says, he was an American marriage counselor, eugenicist, and agricultural explorer. He was influential advocate of the compulsory sterilization of mentally ill people and people with disabilities, and the father of marriage counseling in the United States. Which is like, it is weird that he's like marriage counselor, eugenicist, and agricultural explorer. It's nice to sandwich that one in there just in the middle like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
can you define eugenicist for us?
So the eugenicist essentially is an old pseudoscience that believes that the races are genetically different and that we should breed out, and also people with like disabilities or people who are maybe neurodivergent. They wouldn't have obviously said that back when the eugenics was popular, but basically we can breed people like we breed animals, and this will like create inherent traits, and so you can breed things out. And so there was like a mass sterilization of, again, people with disabilities. Certain races were heavily, and this is in the US too, by the way, like literally, I don't know if people know this, but like a lot of the ideas that the Nazis had later on about doing sterilization came from the United States because we had so many eugenicists. So yeah, learn history because it's important. But also, this guy wrote the foreword to Dobson's book. So Dare to Discipline was his first book, and a eugenicist wrote the foreword to the book. So I think that's pretty.
And Popenoe, like, he was really into like this idea of a super race. That was, we all know what color that would be as well too.
Pale and pasty.
Yes.
Easily burned in the sun.
The idea that's a super race, but like the sun will all kill us.
And we're also so lazy that we have to enslave other people to work for us. That's the master race.
Yeah.
The whole Skinner thing, the behaviorism that he promoted is probably one reason why it's so hard to talk about trauma-informed stuff now.
Absolutely.
Because he just elevated this 100-year-old philosophy, and wove it into his dysfunction, and then prescribed it for everyone, and everybody listened to him. I mean, the Independent Fundamentalist Baptist Church, when you go back into that history and I see all the abuse and everything and some of the videos about that, it's disgusting. Yeah. But it comes from Dobson. Dobson was, the spokesman for everybody, I guess.
He was like also the child psychologist for like decades. Yep. Like most people, especially Christians, but even a lot of secular people would pay attention to.
Yeah. But I think, in the end, it turns out to be, maybe his fate or his failure was he didn't keep up or take account from recent discoveries and so on. He just totally ignored all that with the purpose of educating the masses to be white and evangelical and stupid. He just was he was a force.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and that's even going on. Like, I do have to say, he went to prestigious schools. He was like very highly educated. But again, and anyone who has like read psychological research anywhere before like the 80s, maybe 80s, maybe some in the 70s, but definitely like back into the 60s, like it was all that kind of stuff. Just like everything is science and everyone is the same. And literally on psychological exams now, if you want to pass to get licensed, they'll basically test you on that. Like you can't say this is the rule. There are no rules because everyone's different. Like there's nothing that works for everyone. And like you mentioned this, Dad, on a previous podcast, but like behavioralism will work at least for some time for like most people. I don't know what that
90,
percentage will be, but it'll
90%.
It will make people, but and the thing is it doesn't really work, right? Because it causes trauma and it fucks people up down the road. It works for the fact that I have a kid, I want them to shut up. And if I hit them and then tell them it's okay, they'll probably shut up. Like it works in that sense. And so, yeah, like a lot of people, you know, working a lot, they're busy. They don't want to have to deal with all these problems with their kids. And so they try these things and hey, now my kid shuts up when I'm in the house. Now, is it because your kid's petrified of you? Yeah, but you don't really care because you want to sleep or something like that, you know? So I think he was a very good scholar. And in addition, what you were saying is that like he didn't update himself. He really didn't, because he re-put out a lot of his books multiple times, including his first book. But basically he would put them back out and he wouldn't change any of the science or any of the suggestions. He would just kind of rearrange things or add things to them. But it wasn't anything new. He didn't ever look into the new research. And he basically, there are articles, and I added some quotes inside the document, but there's too many to go over because he has a million quotes because he's been on radio since the 1980s. But he basically will talk about like, you know, anyone who says that like hitting your kids or like, you know, doing discipline doesn't work is wrong. And it's like, what are you talking about? There's a plethora of evidence that says the contrary. Like you're clearly not reading the most recent literature because 99% of psychologists totally disagree. And I think that's true for people in a lot of fields. And I think that's why we do need to do our own research, but like actually like do your own research, like actually research into the field and like read metadata studies and things like that. Yeah, it's very dangerous to remain uneducated.
Yeah, but to call into question anything would mess with his empire. You know what I mean? Because they're never going to retract. They're never going to say this. I mean, he's got his own thing, you know, dare to discipline. As if like parents before they read the book were like, I'm not going to discipline. I'm not going to go there. And they get the book and like, oh, I can. I'm going to dare to do it. I'm going to dare to hit my...
Yeah.
And yeah, but see, I feel like because he has a whole worldview he's pushing and it doesn't really change or shift. And so the idea I believe it's on purpose, because if there is new data and stuff, I mean, they're just going to find ways to brush it just to say, no, that's not really what we've seen or what we've found, because they like the conclusions that they already have.
Well, and to that point, he was quite prolific in his field, but he worked even at like the American Psychological Association, but he left in 1973 when they moved forward. They decided, oh, homosexuality isn't a mental illness. And he's like, not for me. And he left. Like, it's the clearest demonstration of just that you're not willing to like learn and adapt, and you don't actually care about the science. You care about working backwards from your conclusions. And it's frustrating for me.
Well, let's start with his initial conclusion, dare to discipline. So he's saying is dare to punish and dare to adopt my model of how to raise a kid. But discipline comes from the word disciple. So disciplining someone means to teach them. Okay, so it's way different than beating them because I'm frustrated and because I'm dysregulated, because they're dysregulated and it's trying to control violence with violence.
Yeah, I would argue it's not very disciplined for a grown adult to lose their temper and beat the shit out of a child.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're not disciplined, neither are they disciplining their child. They're hitting their child. They're punishing their child. They're taking away things. They're giving gifts or whatever. But discipline is teaching. And remember Deuteronomy, you know, where I hate to quote Bible verses, but it's to my benefit. I'm just kidding. So they
talking about cherry picking evidence.
It's a good pastor. Of course. Good pastor move.
It talks about teach them when you're walking by the way, when you're going about life. It's that ongoing. And I think if you're going to pluck out of the New Testament and say we need to discipline our kids, okay, let's teach them as we walk by the way, as we go throughout life. We point out things to them. We show them examples. We show them by our example how to work hard and how to study and how all those kind of things. That's all discipline. But
the Socratic method, essentially.
But yeah, what Dobson's becomes is that independent fundamentalist guy that was, in that Institute for Better Life Principles, IBLP, and all that. Yeah. There's that gross thing on stage when he pulls a boy out of the audience, puts him over his knee, and starts to spank him real slowly and just go, "I love you.
Call me daddy."
Yeah. It was so gross. And, that was with the IBLP guy and that whole shenanigan of homeschooling stuff but let's understand discipline. We're going to analyze, if we're going to go back and analyze the mistakes that started in the 70s and 80s and is culminating now in what we've got right now, then we really do need to talk about discipline, but we need to understand that it's teaching. It's teaching them how to regulate. It's teaching them how we cope with life, how we get through these tough times, not beating the evil out of them or whatever you think you're doing. Because I'll say this again, I want to say this one more time, but I'll say it again. The people that say we got spanked and we turned out okay are never the poster child for we turned out okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not just being petty about that. I mean, because all of us are screwed up by it, right? I mean, all of us have been affected by behaviorism and those type of things. But I'll just say this and then I'll shut up, that we got to acknowledge that and acknowledge that we're off track, not just because I'm James Dobson and I've said the same stuff for 40 years that I'm going to keep saying it. We need to be saying, hey, I learned, I was discipled, I was disciplined by someone showing me the right way and correcting me when I was wrong, but not forcing me to comply. That's not love. That's not discipline. That's not anything but just violence.
I think that's the problem, though, is that after he basically got out of university, he immediately went to teach at the university, so he's immediately in a position of power, didn't have to learn anymore. Back then, it was a lot easier to get tenure and things like that. And then he, again, immediately gets integrated, as did Graham, with a bunch of these political institutions, namely like being like counseling presidents, discipling presidents in the ways of James Dobson. And so, he in 1977 starts Focus on the Family. He had first made it into like a lecture series, and then he creates Focus on the Family as like we know it today, even though he's not a part of it anymore, but we can talk about that later. And then that goes into what you were talking about, Dad, with like he's disseminating all of this stuff to different churches for free, which we know there's lots of donations, things like that. He also has, quickly gets tax exempt status. And so he basically becomes a thought leader because he's disseminating propaganda for free. I mean, it's the same thing that Dad, you and I used to talk about with Apple computers in schools. You give them away for free to the schools, and then all the kids, you get a tax break on them, and then you also get people hooked on your product because people get used to using those. And that's I think that's a big reason why Apple's popular. But that's a side point. Anyway, but that's how he gets his hooks in, I think. And then he starts Focus on the Family as a radio broadcast. We talked about some of those things before, Adventures in Odyssey, things like that. I was a big fan of that. Quickly grows massive. Reported numbers are, it's hard to say exactly, but 7,000 stations worldwide, 220 million people listening every day, 164 countries, also covered on TV. And then they start to expand. And then, I mean, it's obviously already nefarious, but then this is where he starts to get into more than even just discipline. He starts to get into things like, they had this thing called Operation Ultrasound, where they would give ultrasound machines to crisis pregnancy centers. And if anyone knows what those are, they're basically fake healthcare centers where they basically push propaganda against abortion or against like actual birth control and things like that. And they also did adoption services, which goes back to the eugenics point, where you're basically trying to shuttle these needy kids into good Christian homes,
white
so you can indoctrinate them. Yeah, definitely white Christian homes. Yeah, and he has numerous quotes about this. Like one of his quotes is, "There's nothing more important than parents passing on a generational legacy of faith and values to their children." Like it's gross. Like it's clearly like it's not exactly eugenics, right? Because it encompasses religion as well, but it is like this, we're going to socially engineer society, and it's gross to me. I hate it so much.
Yeah, it's funny
but
doing
most
that
of his stuff is about power and authority when we look at it.
Yep.
I mean, that's
right.
And I was even just like processing the idea of like what he's laying out with like we're on the kid discipline part of it too. I mean, if the idea is like you're as a kid that you have the ultimate authority, which is your parents, and they're allowed to beat you because they're good, and it was you that's sinful. I mean, that I feel like that automatically sets up a situation in our mind too that God is similar to that as well. And then it gives them the license to be able like, well, God must be punishing you for something. What have you done here? And so I know there's a lot of that weird superstitious stuff, but I feel like it's also it's like psychologically grooming people to be abused.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
By the church or their family.
Yeah. Dad, were you going to say something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I already forgot it, so never mind.
Well, we were also talking about in the last podcast we did about basically this kind of grift where you have, pushing for religious schools to be set up, which Dobson's definitely in favor of, but that you have kind of churches getting money and then pushing propaganda for schools to create private schools, and then also pushing that money to candidates and things like that. You have this kind of corruption. Well, his wife ran a thing. I don't know if you guys know about the National Day of Prayer. You guys know about National Day of Prayer?
Yeah, we've done that a few times, right?
Yep. We definitely done that. Well, his wife ran that from 1991 to 2016. So, basically they were headquartered out of Focus on the Family's headquarters. And so they're just dumping money into it. It's just 2 cups of water just dumping into each other all the time. And then also helping each other, of course, like advertising, get donations and things like that. So it's just this incestuous relationship where they're just making money off of each other. But I did go, I went to the National Day of Prayer Task Force website, and the first article I found was entitled, "Pour out to the God of Hope and be filled," which goes back to what Stuart was talking about with the Spank Me Daddy. Especially after getting out of it, everything Christians say is so erotic, and especially homoerotic. And it's like these people are so focused on homosexuality all the time. Being gay is bad. And then you wonder why you see all these pastors, snorting meth off of gay prostitutes' asses and stuff. Like, it's like, you guys are too obsessed. I know I have many gay friends that don't think about gay sex as much as Christian pastors do.
Good point.
It's crazy. It's insane. And we won't get too much into it with spanking your kids, but anyway, there's so many things they do. They do. Do you guys know about Family Talk? Is the thing he's doing currently. He's pretty old. I think he's 89 right now. So he comes on the show every once in a while, but basically he just recreated Focus on the Family, and it's not really clear why he left, because like Focus on the Family is like, oh, we left amicably, and like we actually gave him some money to start it, and he's like, yeah, no, it's fine. But there is some people that say like he was being too political, or he wanted to be more political, and so he left. Because Focus on the Family seems to be trying to cut the political thing out a little bit, even though obviously they're not going to do that, because as we've seen, Christian organizations, as talked about in the last podcast, are getting more and more political all the time. And we need to cut
and even like stuff. I mean, I remember, because you're talking about them being too political, because he's done a bunch of stuff against like AIDS, or AIDS outreach.
Yep.
I know, like I remember it would be like even like the idea you're giving people condoms.
Yeah,
that's bad. We shouldn't be doing that at all. And things like that. And I'm kind of like, well, wait, I don't understand what you're doing here. I mean, you're even a doctor, and you should be able to know some of these things. Like, don't make any sense what you're doing, but political agenda first before anything scientific.
Same thing with Reagan, though. Is it's just like they're, with AIDS and things like that, they're just like, they're willing to do a genocide against gay people, just like let them get infected and die, which is definitely what Jesus would have wanted. He wasn't like friends with prostitutes and shit. So anyway, move past that quickly. Don't think about that too much. Speaking of anti-gay stuff, he was very heavily involved in the Day of Dialogue, which was before 2010 was called the Day of Truth. And basically what that was it was created to go against the National Day of Silence, which was to protest bullying against like queer people, basically. It's like all it was. So it's basically just an excuse for a bunch of like dumb, and this was me when I was in high school. I was a dumb Christian kid that didn't really understand what was happening, but would just say offensive things to like get a rise out of people sometimes. But it basically gives them carte blanche to go into the school. And if you want to read news stories about this, there's tons of stories about kids going in with like, our school like allows the homosexual agenda to flourish. It's destroying America, blah, blah, blah. It's just an excuse for Christians, adult Christians, which is even more disgusting, but also Christian kids to just go into schools and bully those kinds of the LGBTQ community even more. Like, it's just such a sick, disgusting thing. Instead of actually having dialogue, you're just like, we don't like what you're doing, so we're just going to do our own thing.
Right, force you out.
Yeah. All in the name of Jesus.
Yeah. Praise him. Let him be praised. Let us get on our knees and be filled with
Praise
him.
May the Lord.
Thankfully, that has not happened nationally since 2018. So hopefully that's going away. But there's a bunch of them. You guys know, this is again another very homoerotic one. Love One Out.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Which
I sort of remember that.
Every time I hear it, I hear Love One Out.
Loved one out. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's actually WON, not ONE. But I always think of like rub one out. It's like all I can think of. It's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, that's
but anyway,
what it sounds like in my head too.
It's the same thing. It's basically an excuse to push conversion therapy and things like that, which was eventually do you guys know Exodus International?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, if he was involved with Exodus International, because there's
not directly, but yeah, he worked with them in some cases, but they took over after he left, after Focus on the Family.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then, I mean, you can watch documentaries and see how that never worked at all.
Yeah.
It just really didn't work at all.
It's torture.
I remember, from a conservative evangelical mindset of trying to address homosexuality. What should I do with that? And I was really seriously considering it, even when I was steeped in that. And I thought at first, well, Exodus International, that's something to deal with it. And even then, even when I was steeped in all that, this doesn't sound right. What you're doing. And JD and I have a personal friend who's been through that mess, right? Maybe not at the conference, the big fancy things, but was sent off somewhere to be converted.
Yeah. And that
didn't work.
That's basically what they would do. But of course they always couch it in this nice stuff. Like they said their purpose was to exhort and equip Christian churches to respond in a Christ-like way to the issue of homosexuality, which means, again, electroshock therapy, which in the hands of people who are not trained clinicians is just torture. Like, that's what you're doing. There is a humane way to do shock therapy, but the way that they're doing is not chaining people to beds, letting them lie in their own filth. That's torture. You're torturing children in most cases. And yeah, I mean, the only thing good that they ever did was disband in 2013. So basically, the only good thing they ever did was die. And yeah, their like former leader, nor Margaret Thatcher, a lot of other people.
That's true.
And part of the problems was that whatever the conference was called centered around all of that conversion therapy. I can't remember the exact name, but the thing was that conference, eventually people were just going to have gay sex,
kind of like the RNC.
Yeah. It just didn't, it didn't work.
So didn't it, once they closed down Exodus International, are they the ones that actually created Grindr later?
I think that's probably accurate, honestly. The interest. Do you guys know about Alan Chambers, the guy that ran Exodus International for a while? I was trying to figure out more about him. He came out and apologized later and said, like, "Oh, I'm not anti-gay anymore," because he was a pray the gay away guy. Like he is gay. Let's be honest, but he married a woman eventually and converted, and he made a movie or no, he wrote a book. He wrote at least one book, maybe two books. And I think his last book came out in 2015 or 2016, and then he just disappeared. So I'm hoping he's living happily on some island with his boyfriend now, but I don't know what happened to him. I was just wondering if you guys had heard anything from him. I'm glad he apologized for it, but I think he's still a minister.
Sure he is.
I don't know.
No, but
hope he's reformed.
All this stuff with Dobson. I mean, all we seem to have talked about is how much damage and trauma, like that has been his legacy on other people, like creating pain, creating shame, creating trauma. I mean, this is. I mean, that's his legacy, and people in the evangelical world will celebrate him when he passes.
Yeah.
Hopefully, but when all of this stuff, they will celebrate him as a hero of the faith.
Yeah, because he owned the fags, right? I mean, that's what they'll say, that he
Pretty
owned
much,
it. And it's, we're off topic kind of a little bit on Access International, but the underlying premise there is there's a magical solution. If you come to us, you'll get the magical solution. Even though the guy that led True Love Way or Purity Culture was in no way qualified to lead Purity Culture. He hadn't even been married yet or anything. And he was young and inexperienced. But there's just that idea that problems can magically be solved. That if you just were committed to Jesus, if you just were holy enough, if you just prayed the right prayer, the Jabez prayer or whatever it's called, if you just do this thing, then something magical is going to happen. You're going to totally change. And that's not true. And even if homosexuality was against God, even if homosexuality was wrong, there's so much trauma that comes along with standing up to the church that them walking the aisle or say I denounce homosexuality is not going to fix their woundedness that they have because they were ostracized and treated badly and allowed to be persecuted and all those things. There's no magical solutions. There's things that work better than other things. All of it requires hard work. And Christianity's been trying to evade that from the beginning.
But
in my opinion,
people in general have been, that's just the way that these kind of people work. I mean, it doesn't even have to be religion. I mean, it's the whole idea of the snake oil salesman. They're trying to sell you an instant cure, an instant remedy, and then they move down the road. Once they've got their money and you're poor and destitute or you're dead because of whatever they did to you, well, they're already gone. It's fine. They're still making their money. But I was going to say another thing that is even more related, because I think people are like, oh, well, he's not, I've never heard him on the radio, or like he's far back. Another group that he founded was the Alliance Defending Freedom, which was formerly the Alliance Defense Fund, because formerly it was just kind of like a advocacy group. Yeah. And now, but then they started getting into like actually litigating cases. So tell me if you've heard of any of these cases. The gay cake cases, so the Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission in 2018, and the one that just happened that actually did roll back civil rights, because the first one, the Masterpiece Cake Shop, didn't really work, which thank inshallah, thank God. But the 303 Creative LLC versus Alinis, I think is what it's called, in 2022, that actually has like curbed the ability of homosexual people, of gay people, queer people to be able to go in and actually get services, because now they're much more able to deny them access to those things. Also, Lawrence versus Texas, which was they were trying to repeal the sodomy laws in Texas, and they fought against that. The Hobby Lobby case, they've been involved in all the bathroom bill bullshit. The Dobbs case, which essentially repealed Roe v. Wade, that was legislation that they had. Again, we talked about this in the previous podcast. These groups, these lobbying firms, these lobbying groups will write legislation, send it to people like, let me pick a random name out of the hat. Who's the asshole today? Ted Cruz. That's who I choose. They'll send him and basically they just they fill in the blanks that they need to fill in. Texas here, Texas, and then they sign it. And then, and then they introduce it as legislation. Like they don't write their own legislation, and most of the time they don't read it anyway. But that's like all those things, all the rights that people are seeing stripped away right now, directly related to James Dobson. He was a founding member of this group.
Yeah, I think he, along with Jerry Falwell, a few more players like that, they're some key people, and they were white, they're middle-aged, they were authoritative,
authoritarian,
and that's,
and they like spanking.
That's that's why people follow Billy Sunday. That's why people followed the original Billy Graham. Sorry,
Yeah.
Billy Graham wasn't exactly like he was later. I mean, he started out different than what he became when he realized that fear and hate could bring people to Jesus, supposedly. I mean, that's just the leaders we've gone to, just kind of that stable looking white person that we want somebody to have all the answers for us. And it doesn't really work that way.
I've got a question for the elephant in the room. We've been talking around this with Dobson.
Hey, I resemble that remark.
Okay.
What are you talking about my weight? Come on. Sorry, Stuart.
I'll just keep going. No, that's good.
Sorry.
No, I had more to give in that interaction, but I want to stick to what I'm trying to remember here. But we've been talking about all of this, like, we've talked about like folks at Exodus International, like that were like closeted gay, and so we've talked around this idea of projection, and in how people like project the things that they're struggling with. So if we were to look back over James Dobson's life, I mean, he had some pretty big bents that he was against, and I think a lot of it's personal. So I'm just curious, like, if we want to, what do we think what's he hiding?
I tried to say that directly to Pastor Josh that we talked about in the last episode. He got engaged only one time on the Facebook discussion about what was going on with Pastor Kirk. And I said to him, I think thou dost protest too much. And he didn't get it. He said, we don't protest. There are protesters outside our church. And like, you didn't understand what I said.
Some Shakespeare, you moron.
I think that's definitely an issue, right? That a lot of times, you can see it clear in Trump because he's just an unadulterated narcissist asshole. So, I mean, you can see it very clearly in him that he's putting on Biden whatever is wrong in his life. And he thinks if I can point out that somebody else is, and that's bad, then nobody's going to look at my life or how I've come through.
Yeah, you just keep attacking. I think, speaking to Stuart's question, I think he's a bit of a sadist, to be honest.
Okay.
That's just my guess. But okay, so for instance, he's from Church of the Nazarene, and they believe in like purification, right? You can basically purify yourself, of course, when you get saved, but also like on earth and basically become pure. And he definitely, from things that he said, believes that he has. But what he also believes, going back to just beating children, is he has this quote: pain is a marvelous purifier. It is not necessary to beat the child into submission. A little bit of pain goes a long way for a young child. However, the spanking should be of sufficient magnitude to cause the child to cry genuinely. That's fucking sadistic.
Yeah, it's traumatizing.
You're seemingly gaining pleasure out of that. And it's gross. And exactly. Also, of course, for the child, it's horrible, but it seems, I don't know. Like, I just don't. I mean, I feel like a lot of parents, when they do spank their children, they actually, I'm sure some of them get some pleasure out of, which again is sick. You're a sadist. Leave the spanking to the adults, please. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of parents do kind of feel like bad after they spank their kids, but they're just like that's where the whole axiom of like, this hurts me more than it hurts you. And in some cases that might be true, but then again, why are we traumatizing two individuals instead of just having a fucking conversation? Like, it's just, but again, another part of that is that it's all about hierarchies for Dobson. It's all about hierarchies. Men over women, women and men over children, and then male children over female children, of course, because he's got to be also a misogynist.
In a way, it does hurt them more than it hurts you, because, they always say about narcissism, narcissism hurts us all, even the narcissist. That, I mean, you're inflicting violence to control, a normal reaction in a child when he's traumatized, or when he's hungry or upset or disagrees. There's no proof that it works. There's no proof that it's helpful. There's a lot of proof that's damaging, not just to the kid, but to all of us.
Well, and the sixth subtext in all of this is, by beating your kid, God is happy with you.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's the ultimate hierarchy structure. Somehow the God God's pleased. God's pleased when you inflict violence on your own children.
And IBLP lasts a long time. In that framework, that homeschooling IBLP, it lasts a long time until they can't cry anymore. It's huge. It's not that they're disfiguring them or anything, but maybe hitting them with a glue stick for 45 minutes. It's just ridiculously warped and out of touch, out of balance.
But all of this is learning through violence. That's what he's talking about. I mean, whether it's conversion therapy, whether it's your children, the only way that we learn is via violence. Yeah. And, I understand change and learning is hard. And sometimes change feels like violence within ourselves. But this is not the kind of thing that we're talking about here. That most of what he's implying in all of this is, this is the way. This is the way God made us. God is happy with this. And this kind of violence is cool. Yes, absolutely.
But also, I mean, it does make sense because God tortured his son for 3 days to save everyone's sin. Like the only way you get purification is if you sadistically torture a man for a few days. So maybe it tracks. What were you going to say, Dad? I cut you off.
I think I already forgot again. It's my habit, I think. Is just, I agree with you. I think you're right.
It's just I don't know. People can go and look up his quotes, and he honestly he has a lot of quotes that are just like they're fine. But this is why I don't like quotes, is because they're just platitudes. But a lot of them are like a little, again, very Christian in the fact that they're like kind of sexual. Like, great beginnings are not as important as the way one finishes. I think that's a little bit sexual.
Or where one finishes.
We won't talk about that. He would say inside.
He doesn't like condoms.
He's a natalist. So yeah.
He does. Yeah.
Also, things like. And then again, you can also when you track these things, they don't apply to everyone. He has another one that's one of the most important responsibilities in the Christian life is to care about others, smile at them, and be a friend to the friendless. Be a friend of the friendless, except for the fucking gay people, or except for the people I don't like. Like then you can be an asshole.
Disobedient child.
Or when you're beating the fuck out of your kid. Yeah, that would be bad. I mean, but again, I think it is sadism. I'll give you one last quote, which is some strong-willed children absolutely demand to be spanked, and their wishes should be granted. 2 or 3 stinging strokes on the legs or buttocks with a switch is usually sufficient to emphasize the point. You must obey me.
Wait, are you reading from 50 Shades, or is this
exactly?
Yeah. I know. Yeah,
mom for that. And Laura's laughing.
It's crazy.
I was going to say what I was going to say a minute ago that I forgot what I was going to say. I remembered it, which I do that often. Is I think what would benefit us all more than anything now is just do some basic research about the brain, do some understand what regulates us and what dysregulates us. Understand how when you're a parent hitting your kid, you're dysregulated and you're trying to regulate them, and you don't even understand how your stress response system works, and you don't understand why it's working like that and why the child is acting like that. They're acting like that because it's an innate thing in them that wants to survive, and it thinks it's doing the best thing to survive, and it's in survival mode right now, and it's not the time to have a confrontation. It's the time maybe to hold them or listen to them and try to understand what they're thinking. And that's not a waste of time. It's not a cupcake or whatever the word is thing to do. It's the right thing to do. First of all, learn how to regulate yourself so you don't fly out the handle at people. Second of all, understand how their body works and how their survival system is working, their root brains functioning and firing and all that. If we could do that, if we could learn to understand how we're put together better than excusing it with I'm created in the image of God. Well, is God a wife beater? Is God a child beater? I think you're missing it somewhere. I think you've got off track. The narrative's got off track of what reality is, of how our bodies and minds and nervous systems actually work. So if someone's out there just disagreeing with everything we've said so far, first start with understanding how human beings work based on science, based on experience, based on actual facts, not a dogma we're trying to prove. Find out how we really are, and then maybe understand a little bit more how we could help each other, disciple each other. Back to that word, we could go back to discipling each other, teaching each other through our example and through our calm discussions. Anyway, my 2 cents.
Concurred. We have to stop working backwards from conclusions or making excuses for our shitty actions. Because that's what it is. It's just finding a justification for, I freaked out and beat the shit out of my kid. So how can I justify that? I think in a lot of ways. For a lot of people that listen to Dobson. I think for Dobson, it was taken from a place of like shitty research, unethical research in a lot of cases, and also comparing children to animals and not really realizing that the human brain is far more complex than that of a lab mouse or a dog or something. But,
yeah. Even if he studied animals correctly, he would understand how regulation and dysregulation works at a base level, and then, it's more complicated with humans, but he didn't draw the right conclusions.
When you're looking at psychological study, and I, if people want them, I have to teach them in my classes, psychological studies from the 50s, 60s, and the further you go back, the worse it gets, but it's not ethical and usually not good science.
So there you go.
I got a stack of studies if anyone wants them. So hit the comment section, please. That's all I got.